For years, I was making three major mistakes when I was doing my rear delt reverse flies, and today I'm going to tell you what those three mistakes are so that you can avoid them and what to do instead. All right, so mistake number one is by far the biggest, but conveniently the most easy to fix, which is simply standing way too far away from the cables so that the cables are pulling you forward rather than across. So take a look at the way that I'm setting up and executing this version of the reverse fly. What you'll notice is that I'm not stepped into the rack, sort of between the cables, I'm actually stepped backward, and this is how many people do it. And the problem with setting the reverse fly up this way is that the function of the rear delt is to basically move the arm outward. When you step backward far away from the cable, you're basically unloading the position that the rear delts are strongest in and where they're gonna contribute most of the motion, which is when your arms are basically right here when your biceps are nearly kissing. And when you step backward away from the cable and you're pulling backward this way, your traps are really gonna start to take over the motion when your arms start to get toward the sides of your bodies. So by stepping back, what you're doing is you're not only not loading the position that the rear delts are gonna contribute most to, but you're overloading the position that the traps are really gonna have to take over in. A lot of people try to problem solve for this by just rigidly trying to keep their scaps still and just like wiggling their arms in front of their body. But a much easier way to fix this is just to step forward between the cables so that your arms are now being actually pulled across the body, which again is where you want to load that rear delt most and where it's going to contribute most of the motion. So primary takeaway is step forward in between the cables rather than backward away from them, because stepping forward will actually allow you to load the rear delts where they're contributing most and where they're strongest, and it will allow you to unload the portion of the range where the traps are going to start to have more leverage to move the entire shoulder girdle backward. So the second mistake is just trying to use too much range of motion. And this is a mistake that will still screw everything up even if you've problem solved for the first mistake. Because if you're constantly trying to get your arms all the way back behind your body, what you need to do is retract the shoulder blades. In other words, you need to call on the traps and the rhomboids to start to move the shoulder blades backward so that you can actually get your arms there. So what you need to do instead is basically just minimize the range of motion to this window in front of the body. My starting point recommendation would be to use the range from here to maybe somewhere just shy of being in line with the body. Because what you'll start to realize is by the time you get here, a lot of the motion actually occurs through retraction of the shoulder. Look how much range I'm actually creating simply by just pulling my shoulder blade backward. What we want to see is just motion of the upper arm and minimal motion of the shoulder blade. So mistake number one is stepping too far backward. Make sure you're between the cables. And mistake number two is using way too much range of motion that is predominantly just going to fall on the traps and the rhomboid. And then mistake number three is never thinking to use just one arm at a time instead of two. This has a host of benefits, but the main one is simply that you can actually achieve a full stretch and range of motion on the rear delts with one arm as compared to two arms when your arms are just running into each other. Now, a lot of people say that you can just cross over like this, and to be honest, I find that uncomfortable and destabilizing. So what I like to do is actually load the arm across the body so that the rear delt can not only get more stretch, but also so that you can load the rear delt more in the stretch position. With two arms, you're going to be limited in how much range of motion you can use and also how much you can load that stretch position. So another variation that I absolutely love is just using one cable at a time, where you set up so that your body is basically braced against the cable column and where the cable is actually pulling behind you to load that stretch position rather than just simply across. Now, this may look like very minimal range of motion, but I promise 100% of the range is going to be just directed straight toward that stretch position of the rear delt. And because the load is actually angled backward behind you, you really don't have to put any effort into trying to keep the traps out of it, because if the load is pulling you backward in this direction, the traps really don't have much to do anyhow. It's really just a pure shoulder motion when your arm is in that front portion of your body. So overall, those are the three mistakes, and if you avoid them, I promise that the rear delt gains are going to come much faster. If you're still watching at this point in the video, please make sure you subscribe and share it with a friend, and if you want to learn more from me, check the links in the description below. I'll see you all in the next video.